Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. It's Thursday, and Thursday is the day of Ukraine, where we discuss what's happening in that war. Of course, this week has been crazy, and I have with me Major General Prabdeep Singh, who will agree with me that Ukraine war never fails to bore us. This is one war. This is that where you get what you paid for in terms of entertainment. Let me just say that very clearly. Uh, Sir, good evening. Welcome to the show. Before I give a further introduction, let me just bring you in and to
Thank
substantiate a
you.
point.
Thank you very much. And it's good to be back again. And Thursday is what I look forward to when discuss Ukraine. Lots happening around Ukraine, and I think there's lots to discuss.
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah,
Every week, something or the other, sir. That's something very
absolutely.
interesting. It's like a weekly soap opera, if I may.
Very true.
So let's talk about this paper leak. This Pentagon leak which has happened,
Yeah.
and I want to leave the rest of the stuff across, which is spying on this guy, spying on that guy. वो बात करते हैं उसके बारे में. We'll talk about that, but let's talk about the Ukrainian aspect of it, sir. It shows a very bleak picture. I mean, the kill ratios are between 1:7. Uh, their weapons that they're talking about are going to come by the end of April, and they're talking about an offensive within 10-15 days. I somehow don't. Is this like the अब वो बच्चा है उसको चॉकलेट चाहिए चाहिए तो उसको ले यार तू चॉकलेट खा ले लास्ट है ये.
You see, Adi, if we go back a couple of weeks when we discussed Ukraine, I think nothing much has changed from our prediction. We always said that this was whatever was happening in Ukraine is not an organized affair, and these leaks would have taken place from the Pentagon. We are aware from the whether from the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, or from the DoD, or from whichever office they've taken place from. One must understand that any intelligence agency is will always put forth the facts. Since I've been a part of the DIA myself, and I understand the role is an advisory role when you put across facts as they exist. That you do to the, you brief the higher commanders, and then it is their call. Because if you are painting a wrong picture, then you're not doing your job. So I'm very sure that whatever is written in these documents is a very authentic, these are very authentic inputs. Now, I'm going to come to something interesting later on also, countering what I just said. But if it is a genuine document put forth by the intelligence agencies as a briefing document, it's a very, very candid document. It is leaked, that's a different story. Now, when it comes to Ukraine per se, I and you have always discussed and agreed upon that the supply chain, as far as the ammunition is concerned, weaponry is concerned, Ukraine has been asking for it. Ukraine has
Constantly.
Ukraine has been, literally crying hoarse for ammunition. Some bit of it is coming through uh, promises exist, but actually, is the country getting in that kind of ammunition? I haven't heard or seen a report which says that so much of tons of ammunition is arrived. That hasn't happened. So obviously, the fragility of the situation is something that we got to see. So what is there in the leak saying that the air defense ammunition is going to run out by the month of May or end of April is very much true. And I take it at on face value, which is absolutely, I think it's bang on. Now, when it comes to the state of training, they've mentioned, how many, it gives out very clearly as to how many troops are being trained uh, in by the NATO. We are aware of that. Now, when you're training troops in a third country, obviously the outsiders are not going to come and train you here in the middle of the war. So these guys have gone out. You are training under situations which are not actually the situation on the ground. So
Mm.
what you when you're training in the middle of a war, and that too in a third country, uh, well, you learn the very basics, but nothing beyond that. And warfare is a very complicated affair. It is not something which you. Uh, th- these are not video games. These are actual war games, which not games, war fighting, which takes place on ground, requires a lot of coordination. So when the leaks the document says and suggests that there is a very very bleak chance of the counter offensive to achieve something worthwhile. I agree to that also, because that is a fact that we've been talking about it. And of course they tell us the directions of the attack. They're looking at retaking whatever has been captured by the Russians in the east, and then thereafter they want to go in down south and retake Crimea and head for the land bridge. Now, I think it's a little far fetched. You may get all the tanks in the world, you may get all the equipment in the world, but until unless you are so fully trained and so fully, entire all the components of war are all have been war gamed, have been practiced, have been rehearsed, is very clear in the mind. If the air force is not in sync with the land forces, it's not going to happen. If the communications are not in place, it's not going to happen. So all these factors would come into play. The logistics is also a major issue. So while efforts are being made to educate and train the Ukrainian army on all these aspects, but executing it on ground is something which I visualize not happening. And hence the assessment which is there in this particular and some of the documents which have been leaked, that there is a very remote chance of this counteroffensive being successful. So I think again that is a fact. Third, it talks of casualties. Well, we all know that a huge amount of casualties have taken place. Of course, the figures have been twisted and turned around as the media claims. Uh, Whatever said and done, it's over 300,000 men killed, soldiers killed. I think 345,000 troops killed on both sides. I mean, let's talk human lives. Why are you talking soldiers? Look at these families which have been displaced, families which have been affected. How many children have got, have become they've
Awful.
lost their
Mm.
fathers. So this kind of a thing which has taken place is not a good thing which has happened. And we know we are not going to discuss as to why it has happened, because we know why it has happened. So the leaks are coming out and telling us all this. It is also talking about other countries, spying on other countries. Well, I don't, I it's not spying. It is not spying on other
It's
countries.
how it is.
It is how the int agencies work. It is how the int agencies work. All those who are dealing with strategic intelligence always keep an eye on every country which is
Friends and
of
foe
interest.
alike.
Which is of interest. You are interested in what is happening in that country. What are its current political state. What is the economic state? We go into great amount of details. So to say that these are these are going to affect relations and this is spying, I don't take it as spying on a country, on a friendly country. It is just keeping a tag on what is happening in that particular country because it's a country of interest to you. So that is what I would look at. Now,
May I just sorry
yeah,
interject?
yeah,
I
please.
have an update from Reuters right now,
Yeah.
and look at the narrative which is going to get set up. And the minute I read it out, you'll understand what I'm saying. Breaking news: An Air National Guardsman suspected of leaking classified Pentagon documents will be arrested today in Massachusetts. A document that has no foreign written on it, top secret, was being handled by an Air National Guardsman. Isn't that too much like saying that the Nord Stream was blown up by two guys in a yacht in the middle of the North Sea?
You're very right. Now, in the beginning, before I started, I said I'm going to give you something which is different. And this is precisely what I was going to talk about. I, I, you know,
Something's wrong here.
no, this document, I mean, if I may just put it in bluntly, they fall. I've just tried to prove to you that this has this pieces of information which is existing and which are coming out practically mean nothing.
Nothing, nothing that we didn't know.
We didn't know, and practically nothing that the adversary would not know.
Yeah,
So, making it a big issue. Why? Now, this is what I
sending a
want to.
larger message. Amazing, sir.
This is the why. Now, I'm going to take you to our last week or last week's conversation where I said that the Americans want to wriggle out of all this. They've got into a mess. Their priorities lie in Taiwan. Uh, they have bitten more than they can chew. How do they get out? Right now, what they have done by, let's assume, or if I may just say, this has been deliberately leaked to the world. Now you understand. Ukraine is
With
not going
nothing
to
on it.
receive with nothing on it. No, it says that look, our assessment which has been leaked, but the fact is, Ukraine can't do much.
Which
It's not a
everybody's
cohesive.
been saying.
Yeah, but now they have to. They are building a narrative all across the world to shape the environment, to shape the minds of the world, to say that look, this is a no go. You getting what I'm saying? They are, and what you just mentioned, and that Air Force National Guardsmen, in the US, the National Guards is given a lot of emphasis during war,
Mm.
and they have a very good system, I must say. It's a very well tried out system. But unfortunately, those guys who are enrolled in the National Guard, very patriotic. They are they report for training once a week, and they are good. But definitely, they are not the soldiers, fighting soldiers. You can enroll yourself and become a National Guard, undergo all the training, and enjoy all the perks and privileges. But how much of a loyalist are you? That is question mark. Compared to a regular soldier who's there and all over. And so that is where we will take this National Guard guy. But it, it, it is a definite, deliberate leak. These are games which are played at the national level. This is not a chota mota league. This is not a small league. This is something. This is a game played to, you know, convince the world that it's not going to be a successful operation. We told you. Our assessment said so. Our assessment, we had assessed it correctly. It's not going to make much headway.
Now they have
So
to negotiate enough.
yeah. So why cut a sorry figure later on? Start admitting slowly and slowly and slowly. So this is a game, in my opinion, being played at a very strategic level, and that is why the media is going ballistic over these leaks.
Yes, sir.
And if you look at the content of the of the document, there's nothing in it. And the Russians have also made a statement saying that this is a deliberate leak,
Yep.
right? And the Ukrainians have also said that, but this leak is not going to have any significant difference on their operation or on their this thing.
Operational plans are still secret. That's
Yeah.
what they said. Yeah.
So the point is, this is something which is a very very deliberate move, uh, to start shaping the environment, to uh, kind of tell the people all over the world that look, our assessments are absolutely bang on. Unfortunately, it got leaked and stuff. The whole idea is, yeah, we have had enough. We've spent too much of money on this. It's all taxpayers' money. The NATO forces are also, the countries are, the public is up against arms, and nothing's going to happen. And the actual Russian military force has not yet been applied, if I may just put it this way. They, after all, that's a country which manufactures, the best of aircraft and the best of tanks, and that's what they're exporting all over the world. We bought them from them, and they've got their fifth generation coming about, and they're even talking about a sixth generation fighter aircraft. So they've got their hypersonic missiles already in place. Everything is, they are way ahead. If I could
Factories,
say that.
production, sir, especially production.
Yes. And they are conscious of the fact, and they've been preparing for it all the while. And it has, the preparation is not something which has started afresh or new. It has always been there, and they've always had this NATO expansion in mind. So it's a fight of an ill-organized army today, semi, defeated, if I may just put it, with lot of weaponry being provided. You give a kid, so many toys. How many can you play around with? And that's precisely what is happening.
Exactly.
So these leaks, in my opinion, are very deliberate. They have no content whatsoever worth their salt. It is just to ratify, or it is just to shape the minds. That's all.
The funny thing that I noticed, sir, you know, which is what kind of stood out with this entire leak. They have targeted it with regards to certain countries and certain information. South Korea, little bit here there. Then they hit Netanyahu. Of course, the anger against Netanyahu has been expressed by the US establishment pretty well.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
this was another closing factor for it. Baki, you know, if it was an intelligence leak, you would have expected something about the Indo-Pacific, about China, about India, about Pakistan, Afghanistan. Those are the critical areas at the end of it. Here they're talking about silly protests here and there. Uh, it's just random stuff which does not change anything on the ground.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I've said. It doesn't change anything on the ground.
Exactly. Yeah.
Uh, this is a kind of an assessment carried out at a, if it has leaked. That means it has leaked from a lower desk, lower level desk, right? So if it was handled at that particular this thing, uh, one should not give it much credence. Credence in the sense, it doesn't. It may be secret because in the armed forces, all the stuff, anything to do with a war is a secret document.
Secret, sir.
Yeah, and
And to
anything
be
which has
safe
a
as it is, secret लगा दो चलो ठीक है done.
yeah, it's not like that. They classifications,
Yeah,
people who handle them at various levels also vary.
correct.
Anything which has plans on it, operational plans are obviously top sec. So one odd document may be top sec where it has a counteroffensive plans, etc. But rest of it, it's secret, which is obviously not meant for common consumption, even within the organization. So somebody got an access to it, and once it is leaked, I think I don't know. I'm not very impressed and not very fascinated by this leak. The way the media has made it to be, it's absolutely with a different motive.
My question, which will come about the narratives, and that's what we were talking about. Now, the narrative will be spread by the same media at the end of it, right? It's the same media that has been lying to the people about Ukrainian casualties and Russian casualties. They've been lying about Ukrainian strength and this and that. How do they switch face in creating this narrative, which is going to go completely opposite the current fixed one? How do you do that with a straight face?
There's nothing. There's no straight face involved in it. I mean, that's where your TRP comes in, and this is what a diktat you will get.
Or you create
Uh,
another incident so that this thing forgets?
well, I don't think any other incident is going to happen so soon. Incidentally, today marks the anniversary of the attack on that ship Moscow in Black Sea. Today
Moscow.
is the 400. Yeah, it's been 1 year since it was attacked, and either you create an incident like this, or you create a Nord Stream again. But as I see it, nothing much is happening on ground as well. If you
Hmm.
look at the fighting also, which is going on today, uh, Russians are using air power again. Large number of sorties being carried out, large number of attacks, missile attacks taking place. So you know where the balance is tilted as of today. And Bakhmut, they can keep saying, the Ukrainians will keep saying, but the fact remains that about 75 to 80% is with the Russians,
Gone. Hmm.
right? And so is the case with that place called Avidivka,
Avdiivka. Hmm.
Advi, Avdivka,
Avdiivka.
and yeah. So all these places are under attack, and as it is, it's a meat grinder, and every day you make very slow progress. It's not. I The media, in a battlefield today, being the media comes up with howitzers being blown, and they show that media. In a war, God knows how many of them get blown up. You know, when you're looking at, there is something called CB, counter bombardment. The moment a gun fires, the trajectory is picked up from the other side, and immediately there are guns laid for CB, counter bombardment. So the radar picks up the trajectory. It's fired from a particular. It traces the trajectory back, and immediately a round is fired onto that to destroy that. So this kind of things are routine and they happen. And trust me, the Russians are very good at it, and they've got. I mean, their capability is much more. At least they're better organized as far as all these things are concerned, vis-a-vis the Ukrainians, which are battling, which are at the moment not cohesive.
So I have, with regards to Russian, this thing, there was somebody was telling a story about this mall attack in Kharkiv.
Yeah.
And what had happened was this Ukrainians were basically in a building across the mall. There was a big mall, and they decided that the mall was a better launching pad for some rockets and all that stuff into Russian forces. So they decided to overnight shift that thing. Now the Russians came to know about this through some ISR, this thing, and the story says within 7 minutes there was a missile attack on that this thing. From
Yeah.
getting the information to tuck out
Yeah.
launch.
Yeah, because what gets picked up are the radio communications, not the communication as to what exactly is being communicated, but the signal, the radio transmission, the signal gets picked up. And there's, we have this is called signal intelligence. So the SIGINT resources will pick up whether by satellite or UAVs or on the ground. They'll pick up the SIGINT, they'll triangulate, they'll note the absolute pinpoint 10 figure grid reference, and they launch the attack. That's it. Users have to feed the coordinates. That's it.
Now,
So
how is
7 minutes.
Ukraine planning to fight against that, sir? Air dominance today because your air defense is going. Currently, they have air superiority. They're going to have dominance. You said the Russian army is not even getting into battle right now.
No, it's
The
not getting
entire
into
damn
battle.
thing is being fought by these Wagner, Chagner, these militias and this and that. The Russian army is not fighting anywhere. Now,
There are reports of brigades that moved in and just to speed up operations. Well, fine, understandable that some regular forces would be there, but
sir,
who's in front? I mean, this is Wagner force. So the main Russian army, whatever said and done, they are not going to commit the same mistake that they did, at the onset of the war, because their aims were different at that particular time. Now it's a different story. Fact remains, they've raised cities and cities. They've raised them down to rubble. They've created rubble all over the country. They're reduced to rubble, these cities. So they use lots and lots of ammunition, a lot of gunpowder, which has been, TNT, which has been thrown at them. Actually, if you look at it, there's nothing left of Ukraine. At least the where the fighting is going on. There are no civilians there. Very few old people who are adamant on staying back are staying back. Who've got not much of life to look forward to, and they prefer to die in their own homes. The rest of the and trust me, the Ukrainians who have gone out are not going to come back.
yeah. Why would this?
They were looking for an opportunity in any case to go to Western Europe, and now they've got an opportunity and they've gone. Why will they come back? So,
Sir, now let's talk about part two, sir.
yeah.
Part two is the most interesting one, where Zelensky goes to Poland
Mm.
and he doesn't say it in the same words, but pretty much has promised western part of Poland to Poland, western part of Ukraine to Poland. I mean, this is something which is now being spoken about even in the West. The
See,
idea you had explained last time to drag in NATO, sir.
that's it. How do you? I mean, you've already reached the conclusion which I would have come to. Uh,
But
the whole game is this: Ukraine will never get absorbed in NATO. Trust me. If it
पोलैंड
had to
बन के
get,
तो नेटो में घुस जाएगा.
वही तो कह रहा हूँ. पोलैंड यूक्रेन में घुसेगा. What that territory will become Polish territory. So they have that many kilometers. They are nearer to Russia. You see, this is the move. And historically, traditionally, Ukraine was always divided between the Poles and the Russians.
Yeah.
Ukraine is known or is also recognized as an artificial creation of a country, right? It is only it is only when these areas got absorbed into the USSR that the Ukrainian Soviet Republic was created,
Created.
right? Otherwise, Russians and the Poles have fought in this specific area. Now, when it comes to the Russian hold on Ukraine, I was I was very amused. I was reading that many of the past presidents of Russia have been Ukrainians or, or born in Ukraine. Or I mean, uh, it's a very interesting reading. Actually, if you go through, I'll forward that to you. It's when you look at the lineage of many of the presidents, past presidents, they were all from Ukraine.
Khrushchev, namely.
Yeah. So when you look at all this, Ukraine was an artificial kind of a creation, and but portion of it, a portion of it, the river. I
Dnieper.
noted down. No, not the Naipa.
The Oskal.
Uh, just a second. That's a very interesting one. I thought. Anyway, there's this river called Zoo. Funny name. Just a sec. Sometime I must refer to my notes also. Zubruch.
Okay.
There's a river called Bruch. Zubruch. I don't know how they pronounce. They add a Z before everything. But that river was the dividing line between the Polish territory and the
Polish.
Russian territory within Ukraine. And inside Poland, you see, during the Cold War, from East Germany onwards, East Germany, the Federal Democratic Republic of Germany, from that end, the Russian troops were always there.
Yes, sir.
So for 48 years, from 1945 to 1993, Russian troops were stationed in Poland. So they've been there for 48 years. Not a funny, not funny. It's though the 91 the collapse took place and all that happened, but it is only in September of 93 that the Russians, the administrative elements of the armed forces, they moved out from
Poland and
Poland.
yeah.
So today, when you look at it, right from Germany, the NATO forces have from the border between East Germany and West Germany and down the line have now come all the way next to Russia. So obviously Russia is not stupid. Russia has had serious concerns about the whole thing. They've absorbed God knows how many nations. They started with 12 nations NATO, and today you're looking at 31. And all that 31 is towards the east. And now with this game of Poland giving away Ukraine, certain portion of Ukraine getting absorbed by Poland, the excuse being traditionally it was Polish, right? The excuse that they're giving is that traditionally it was Polish, and this is what the Russians are also saying, that this is what they are going to do. Because the moment they do that, they come that much closer to
Exactly.
Russia. So the whole game is limited to that. Ultimately, Ukraine, God knows what will be left of Ukraine, because I see the war will only end once the Ukraine is split into two along the river Dnieper. Okay, and this I had talked about, God knows, maybe a year back in another one of the YouTube channels, and that gentleman had the highlight at the heading of that talk was Ukraine will be split into two. And I'm
It's already
talking about,
happened actually, if you look at it.
yeah, but the river line is the main thing. If actually, if I were to do it by now, I'm sure the Russians have these plans in place, and which they're already talking about, and which is the correct thing to do also, is to take on each and every bridge along the river, every crossing point along the river. The moment you have cut off the east from the west, right, you've already created a line. Nobody is going back and nobody is coming in. This is what this
That's
is.
one question I've always had, sir. I mean, Ukrainians have been able
Oh,
to
they're
reinforce.
waiting
Why
for
aren't
the
they hitting these bridges?
yeah, they're waiting for the right time to do it because it makes it makes total sense. All these communication arteries, and these are called, in our military parlance, we call them choke points. All the bridges are kept under observation, right? All the bridges at all times are kept under observation at the local level, at the highest level also, strategic bridges also. And you have plans in place to take on all these bridges when you want to take them on. I don't want to talk much beyond the particular point, but all these bridges, I'm sure the Russians have planned, they're going to take them off. And that's when the split will take place. Either you're this side or you're that side. So you can plan any counter-offensive or anything. If you're not across the bridge, on this side of the bridge, yes, you have pontoon bridges, you have bridge layer tanks, you have all
Yeah,
these
well,
heavy bridges that in the army, we lay all that. But definitely, you can't move that much of a force without it getting
yeah,
interdicted by air or by missiles, because these are static pinpoint targets. So these targets will not, and that's going to happen. That split is going to take place, and then that's the time the war will end. Only thing
that's
that I would want to do if I had to do it was that I would want to have total control over the Black Sea,
Odessa.
Odessa. That is the strategic target which they should be aiming at.
You say that very interestingly because Putin in, I think, February gave a press conference in Sochi or somewhere he was there. And no, he was in, sorry, he was in Belarus. And one of these cheeky French journalists, French or Portuguese or one of these Western European journalists asked him that when would be the right time to visit Odessa?
Hmm.
Putin said two things. One, sooner than later. Second, he said Odessa could be the key.
So yeah, it is. Odessa is the key. The moment you've got Odessa and those two three ports which are adjacent to that, you have actually choked Ukraine from the south, from the seaside, southwest.
And you've
And
linked
if
up with that Piednestrovia or Transnistria or
yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
Transnistria, and all that. If that is what intrigues me, is why are they leaving it till the last? Because or maybe they're looking at first cutting off, waiting for the counter-offensive, deal with the counter-offensive, cut off the bridges, take the bridges off, and then once that what do you call isolation has taken place, then take on Odessa and the areas around.
Weaken
But the
it
moment they
completely.
have done it, they've achieved their aim.
Weaken it completely.
Yeah. So we shall soon see, I think, something happening on that front, at least before the close of the war, whenever it takes place.
Last question, sir. After that, let's get into questions. And guys, please like, subscribe the video, and please share this stuff because the whole media hype about these documents is just too good to be true. That's something I stand by personally as well. And sir has also said this. Uh, Sir, my last question to you is about the EU itself. We see now France today blocked an aid of about 2.8 billion equivalent to dollars, which is supposed to go to Ukraine. There is a news about US planning to sanction Hungary and Croatia and all that stuff. Uh, EU has two groups. You've got one which are wanting to fight these little tiny countries, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and all that. They want to fight. And then you've got these other countries which are fairly strong. France has been resistant, but ठीक है, he's been sending weapons and all that stuff. But French weapons have not been that many. You've got these guys, Croatia, which is coming out, Hungary, which is coming out. No, no, no. The minute this internal thing happens, I remember the first episode that we had done, you had said this war is to put Europe in its place. Let's
Yes.
take that 4 5 weeks ago, or about 2 months ago, sir, and today. Tell us where uh, that particular statement has come to, sir.
You see, as I said, it's all about American trying to gain control over Europe and also to teach Europe a lesson to say that you guys know where, no ways are you going to raise a European defense force, right? No ways are you going to decide your matters yourself. Because the moment, if the United States is not there in the, that environment, then US doesn't exist. It gets automatically isolated. So that is what they were fearing, and that isolation from the Europeans is something which they cannot digest. You know, so that is one. Second, I don't know whether you all noticed the change in tone of France after the visit to China. Did you now that I've put across this, do you realize what I've just said? That anybody who goes to China and he gets back from China changes his line of thought.
Annalena Baerbock is in the flight as we are talking, sir.
Yes.
She's probably flying over India right now.
So anybody who's going there comes back with a realization that look is not going to work out with the United States. And the Chinese that way, I've heard them live in a bigger forum. They are very blunt. When they put across
Fair.
the points, they are very, very blunt. They don't. There is no diplomaties involved in whatever they say. So it would have been an indirect kind of a threat to France to say that, buddy, you better side with us because tomorrow, once the war ends, ultimately you will come running to us and we'll not side you. It's all economics.
France has said, I got options, baby.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
So
And
this
he's
is
he's
this is
calling
what
Modi also there. So there's a lot which is happening in that aspect.
no Zelensky is calling Modi, and I'm sure this visit. I only hope I'm not proven wrong, but if I know our people and I understand our stand correctly, uh, our prime minister will never go.
No, Modi.
Yeah. So we guys are way beyond all this, being told Vishwa Guru and all that stuff. We don't get a piece, so we don't get caught in this trap very fast.
And they didn't send the foreign minister, huh? Who the guy who said that Indian tanks have Ukrainian blood in it. आजा तू इधर blood दिखाते हैं तेरे को अभी. उसको नहीं भेजा. They sent this young little girl, probably five
She's
years of experience. हाँ.
so these kind of immature kind of politicians or diplomats coming to India and trying to win over our people, it doesn't work. So what we were coming to is in Europe, that fear of China is kind of setting in. That if we have to survive as a nation, If we have to grow as a nation, we can only grow with the help of China. Trade with China. It's not. It's all about economics, and without China, no, the Europeans cannot survive. Without the Russians, the Europeans cannot survive. So that realization is slowly and slowly setting in. The smaller countries are, smaller countries gained independence recently. They want to kind of, they are those, as I said, eager to show to the world that we also exist. So their tendency is different.
You
And
mentioned something growth linked to China, sir. Sorry, but
yes,
it just popped something popped in my head. Growth linked to China and growth linked to Russia. Is this also to create the contact back with Russia that the Europeans are running there? यार बात कर ले भाई, गलती होगी माफ कर
absolutely,
ले. ठीक है, उसको बोल
absolutely.
यार प्लीज बात कर ले, फोन उठा ले मेरा. मैं व्हाट्सएप कर रहा हूँ, फोन नहीं उठा रहा मेरा.
No, no, that's a fact. That's a fact. If I want to stay in power, if I want to stay in power, I better provide
Power to my citizens.
power to my citizens, cheap power to my citizens. Without electricity, without gas, it's not going to work. The cheap gas is going to come from Russia. Power is going to come from energy resource. Energy is going to come from Russia,
Has to.
and trade has to be done with China. We have to, grow. Any country in Europe.
Yeah.
Why only Europe? Today we talk the United States. I mean, our own trade, Indian trade is in. While
We
we
have
have our differences with China to a great extent, but when it comes to trade and cooperation, it has grown manifold in the last couple of years. We may be daggers drawn, but at the same time,
we buy
trade
what
has
we need.
trade hasn't suffered. So
Absolutely.
this is how it is. You got to look at your own citizens, and if your citizens are not happy, you are not there. You may be the president, prime minister, whatever. You are not there if people are not with you. If you've
And
screwed
of
up, so
course,
that
anybody who goes away from the US line has protests in their country. So
yes. So this is
Netanyahu
this,
showed his eyes, protest. France showing his eyes, protest.
and
Georgia showed eyes, protest.
Hungary again. You see, Hungary stood by its own this thing
Yeah,
principles, and is making open statements. The rest of the people do not have the guts to do it. So at the moment, Hungary has been ostracized, but then it's okay. I mean, he knows who's going to be coming in handy subsequently.
true.
So Europe, in a way, by aligning with the United States in this particular war, is actually uh, suffering, will continue to suffer if they do not make amends. And the realization that it is the United States using European soil and with the aim of enhancing its own, trade and economy and things like that. So that realization is set in, which I'd mentioned earlier. I mean, in the beginning itself.
You know, and the last final thing, sir, the hypocrisy of it all. The Russian pipeline gas that takes gas through Ukraine to Europe, it's still on.
Yes, that one is on.
Not one crow has touched it. Forget a bomb or anything
They'll
like
not
that.
touch it. They'll not touch it. These strategic linkages uh, have not been touched because they matter. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I think it's a good time to open a business in go and sit next to Ukraine and think 411 billion for reconstruction. So Indian contractors should also start vying for it.
Cement factories. Trust me, I was about to say
Yes,
that. Yeah, yeah. Of course, China is eyeing for it. China is
So
running
China
ahead
is
of.
vying for it. Germany is vying for it. Why not India?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we should have our plans also for the same. I mean,
I
reconstruction
mean,
plans.
the letter that Zelensky has written to Modi has not been released. It's a there's obviously something inside it. A lot of people are speculating that there'll be some negotiations with Joe Biden in Sydney in June, but
Okay.
it's a speculation. I can't confirm. I can't say anything. These are all flying rumors,
Right.
and a lot of people do future analysis. We'll have to see whether it happens or not.
I mean, I've only heard of the humanitarian request for
Yeah,
humanitarian aid
yeah, yeah. Yes. That's this.
that I've heard about, and that I'm sure India will provide because we always believe in that, assisting nations which are in trouble.
Ukraine has also approved examinations for Indian medical students.
Correct.
So I think there's some quid pro quo which has happened in that aspect. Yeah, ठीक है, we'll give you some aid. Make sure our students are taken care of. Make sure their
Adi,
degrees are done with honor.
one point I want to make is an interesting thing which we did not talk today
Sir,
is the presence of NATO forces in troops in Ukraine.
actually, there's a question about it. So I purposely didn't bring it up. मैं बोला चलो
Okay.
आ ही
Yeah,
जाएगा.
we will discuss it. We'll discuss it in the question.
चलो ठीक है.
Right.
There's somebody who's actually said NATO is in Ukraine, and that's it. That's more than a telling statement. मैं बोला चलो जब ये आएगा, we'll pick this up. So
Right. We'll
let's
talk
let's
about it.
begin. Let's begin with this. Ishan, thank you so much for your contribution. He says, sir, they're starting to feel the weight of 800 military bases. The biggest flaw of the West was their sheer hubris.
Absolutely. They've got 800 military places all across the world. And how long? My question is how long? And they are not being welcome everywhere. While small countries, poor nations, yes, uh, but in most of the places, it's not happening. They're not very welcome. They are not welcome because the moment they are there, there is some conflict between that country, the conflict of interest between that country, American bases existing, but their desire to do trade with China. The Chinese influence, as far as again trade that exists, and the presence of United States. So, when it comes to trade, it is the Chinese who say you've got American bases on your soil and you want to trade with us. So you trade with us at a higher price. So that is a kind of a blackmail which uh, continues to take place in these small countries wherever these bases are. So that is where that conflict is existing, and that is the one of the flaws which is existing in by stationing troops all over. Yeah.
Ishan, once again, thank you so much. Jai Hind, sir, one question. The USA keeps stressing that China will be the ultimate winner and beneficiary of the Ukraine conflict. What is your opinion about this statement, on this statement?
How the beneficiary? How is the question? When you're looking at as far as China is concerned, remember their entire aim is that one belt, one road, and the trade route, whatever you call it, you want to
That's
call
it.
it,
Hmm.
you want to call it BRI, you want to call it OBOR, OBOR, or whatever. They have no other interests,
In Europe,
and
nothing else.
their trade with Europe. I do not have the exact figures, so I cannot comment on the figures, but it's huge. The dependency of Europe on China is huge. Now, this very fact, of course, the dependency of the United States on China is also huge. But it is very difficult for the United States to digest that Europe is tilted towards China. So, hence these kind of statements. One. Two, biggest beneficiary would be because of reconstruction, rebuilding Ukraine. As I just said, 411 billion is the estimated cost to rebuild Ukraine. This is a World Bank figure, not my figure.
Mm.
So if it is 411 billion dollars, uh, well, China is going to jump in, Germany is going to jump in, the United States is far away. So China stands to gain maximum.
Correct.
So, right? So that is where it is. Whether it is roads, infrastructure, bridges, destroyed bridges, buildings, whatever name it, and what will they do? They'll bring in their own labor. The Chinese don't use local labor. They bring their own labor. They bring their own workforce. And once they bring their workforce, imagine having a base, a Chinese base in Europe itself. So America is worried. America is making statements like this. So I've just given you 2 points. One is trade, the trade route. Second is rebuilding. And third is having a base in a Chinese base in Europe. Interesting, isn't it?
When two monkeys are fighting, cat will have fun.
Yeah.
John Doe says the Ukraine Deputy Foreign Minister wants Zelensky to speak at the G20 leaders meet in September. If he can get Biden and Putin to sit down in one room, then fine.
Now this is a tricky one. Now the moment Zelensky comes and he cannot be stopped from coming, and this meet which is going to take place where about 120 odd heads of states are going to come. That's in September, as you rightly said, and you'll have Biden and Putin sit down. Well, as far as India is concerned, they are welcome, and it's going to happen. If President Biden backs out, that's a different story. But that he will not, because India is a major ally as far as the United States is concerned. So you can well have all three of them together in one particular room, and that'll be interesting to watch.
Eagerly waiting for that, sir. Uh, I don't know, but I feel like a trap operation slash fake intelligence campaign, just like the Western countries did before Operation Overlord, D-Day landing to the shores of Nazi Germany and France. Hope Russia wins.
If you're referring to Alan, if you're referring to the current leak of information, yes. Uh, Let us see as to where it leads, because these kind of deliberate leaks are also made at the very highest level, and any operation that takes place, when you're even referring to Operation Overlord and D-Day landings, etc. If you've seen all that and you've read about it, you would know that any operation will have a feint attack.
Absolutely.
Any operation will have deception built in, and when you build in deception, trust me, a lot of deception operations are the most difficult operations to execute, because all aspects of going to war have to be played in that particular area. Nothing can be left to chance, because the moment you have not caught on a particular aspect, or not worked on a particular aspect, and it's not been played and timely played, that operation can it can be jeopardized. So deception operations are most difficult. So this leak is very much, could be a part of deception. It could very much, as we have already said, it doesn't have much content. It is trying to fool. If it is trying to fool the Russians have not been fooled. So if today I'm out of uniform, and if I can make out, I'm sure people in uniform with all the resources at their
Mm.
disposal, they know exactly as to what is the truth behind it.
Especially the int behind, and Russia's got good int.
You know, today it's a transparent world, and even in the leaks they've said, you know, that statement that they know exactly as to what is happening in the Russian army and where they're going to launch. Well, the Russians also would know the same. So it's nothing to, uh, nothing intriguing about it. Yeah, let's see. So who wins? I don't want to take sides, but let's see. Yeah, Jack.
In your opinion, what is the weakest point of the Ukrainian forces and the Ukrainian government?
A very good point. I mean, you get me thinking. What is the weakest point of the Ukrainian forces and the Ukrainian government? The weakest point of the Ukrainian forces is the lack of coordination between the armed forces, a lack of far too much of a mix of different kinds of weaponry, and at the moment everything is going on motivation, highly motivated. That's their, I would say, strong point, and it is that motivation and the will to fight for the country which is driving them, but they do
True.
not realize that that alone cannot work. And as far as the Ukrainian government is concerned, the weakest thing is uh, their inability to gauge as to what game is being played by the Americans and for what purpose.
That is true, sir.
They have been
Sadly,
led up. They have been led up a gum tree, and large number of lives have been lost, which is sad.
now let's talk about something that you wanted to talk about, sir.
NATO is already in. Yes, yes, Vasuki. The NATO is already in Ukraine, and if you've been following me and if you heard me before, I had said so that it's not only the mercenaries, it's not only the volunteer forces, it is whenever a special operation has to take place, or whenever you train a different army, and especially so in this kind of situation where Ukrainian army, if I may just put it, is in a total mess. Their war fighting doctrine, what was perhaps existing, which was would have been, based on Russian war fighting doctrine, that has been twisted, and the NATO war fighting doctrine has been kind of imposed on all these countries, including Poland, Ukraine, because the Ukrainians were getting trained since 2014. So, of course, it's been a decade since they were being trained. 8, 9 years, 10 years. So, if you have to get that executed, and having known a little bit of these NATO guys, I had already said that they would be operating alongside in disguise. I mean, they just have to wear the uniform, and they would be guiding the Ukrainian forces as to. After all, if intelligence has to come, now I'll just give you an example. If the United States has to provide intelligence, it has to be real time. It has to be provided real. If it has to be provided real time, trust me, the access to that intelligence or the real time download would only take place to a NATO member sitting on ground. I'm making a very pertinent point.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they won't share their codes with Ukrainians.
Yes, so that device, the laptop or whatever it is, or whatever station that is operating on, who will be the operator? The guy who's getting the information definitely will not be a Ukrainian. It has to be, and it will be an American who will hand over that. piece of information to the Ukrainians. So the operator is an American. The information is going, the intelligence is going to the Ukrainians. And who is interpreting that intelligence for them and guiding them? In many circumstances, again, it could be the NATO forces, somebody from the NATO forces who will interpret that piece of information and tell them what actions to take. So this is something which was natural, if I may just put it. And there was also a report, if you recollect, that one of those Kinzals missiles had landed and destroyed an underground bunker which had NATO troops in it. So this is the way NATO operates, and this is the way they would have operated, and they are operating.
So we are at 1 hour 5 minutes. Request another 5 or 7 minutes maximum.
Yeah.
Just take 3 4 more questions. Uh, if they are able to modulate, Tejas says, if they're able to modulate narratives to their liking in the highly connected world of today. Now, I doubt all the stories from World War II. Do you think all the World War II stories are not entirely true? Absolutely, they're not.
You just said there are stories, right? So a story is a story.
Is a story is a story.
Story is a story. So today the world is connected. Earlier it wasn't, and trust me, World War II was a different game altogether. There were proper fights, there were proper wars, there were coordinated wars. Today, these are times of hybrid wars. This is all part of hybrid. I mean, you look at the mishmash which is existing in Ukraine. You look at the Russian side also. What are they doing? Employing irregulars. I mean, when the Mujahideens, when we were told in Kargil that it is the Mujahideen who's come in, these are not regulars. Pakistanis also gave that narrative, no, that these are not regulars when they came in into Kargil. They happened to be regulars, but they were all dressed up like Mujahideens. Their conversation, their what do you call signals, the communication was all taking place. That was all deception. So these kind of narratives today are easy to discuss and easy to find out because the world is connected, as you said. And World War II, a different game, proper wars. Our wars, 1971, 1965, proper wars, where two full-fledged armies were fighting. Here, I don't know. The this is this is this is not a proper war.
It's a funny business, sir, actually.
Yes.
Seriously.
So that's how it is.
Uh, this is if the ongoing Ukraine conflict ends as a score for Russia, how would one assess West would reorient the defense of Europe? Any impact or rework of the NATO-centric security architecture?
A fantastic question. I could write a paper on this, and I love to write one on this.
Should
And
I send it to you, sir? I'll take
yeah,
a
you can go ahead.
screenshot and I'll send it to you.
Yeah. Now, so hypothetical. Today, the outcome of the war is not known. We we assume Russia wins, right? That's what we're doing. How would the West orient itself towards Europe? Trust me, the NATO security structure, though it is at the moment reorienting itself, redefining itself, and that was the entire aim of the United States. This war is a creation of the United States with a view to ensure that NATO continues to have a hold over the over European continent along with the United States. So if NATO goes, the US goes, and the EU starts thinking on its own, which it had started thinking about itself. They wanted NATO out, and they wanted a European defense force. So that was the situation. So Ukraine got created, and NATO's importance is increased, and so as the United States' importance increased. Supposing Russia wins, A, Ukraine is divided. B, Russian troops are along the river line, I assume, and the NATO forces, the Ukraine is not absorbed in NATO. NATO forces are in the areas which are occupied by Poland, up to that area. Finland has also been absorbed. So now you will have a line coming down, which is a boundary between NATO with a small buffer zone, if I may just put it. Now I'm talking NATO forces. From the NATO forces, you remove the American forces. I say America, thank you very much. Uh, NATO less United States. That means only out of Poland. No troops to be stationed, no American troops to be stationed in Europe. What does that become? It becomes a European defense architecture. आपने खाली क्या निकालना है? You just have to take out the American troops and say, thank you, America, thank you very much. We've had enough of you. Whatever troops are there, please go away. So what do? This NATO acronym goes away, and you replace that with European Defense Forces. इतना ही तो करना है.
स्ट्रक्चर सेम है, ब्यूरोक्रेसी है, आपके पास सब कुछ है.
You got an organized structure in place. You just have to say thank you to the United States and thank you for all the service that they have done in the defense of Europe. Article 5 will exist as a part of the European Union Defense Forces. You have a common military. And trust me, if the United Kingdom, UK, United Kingdom, France, Germany, all these countries gang up together, and the Scandinavian countries, after all, they're a huge industrial base as far as equipment is concerned. Whether it's aircraft, whether it is shipbuilding, whether it is electronic warfare, whether it is infantry weapons coming in from. So everything is existing. Only thing that is extra over here are the American troops in Poland or elsewhere in some other bases. They just have to be told to leave. And as it is, there was a campaign which was going on, which asked NATO to leave, American troops to leave. Germany had explicitly asked them to leave the country. And even today, those posters have again started coming about in Germany. So no NATO or nothing like that. So you take off NATO and write EU on it, less the Americans. That's it. And you have the European defense architecture in place without much worry. EU headquarters, Brussels, NATO headquarters, Brussels, already existing.
No, pura setup is there, bureaucracy is there, everything is there.
Everything is there. You just have to say thank you to the United States. And trust me, the day is not too far when they do that. And that will happen because of the Chinese influence. That will happen because of the trade with China. That will happen because of dependence on Russia and the benefits that accrue to Europe by being friendly with Russia and with China. Interesting situation.
Just a flip side of it also, sir. Ishan brings up a very interesting point. He says, what I meant is China is looking at the Ukraine war as a means of decoupling the US from EU. So it's the other way around as well, and the Middle East.
Yeah. So it's in China's interest to ensure that this decoupling takes place, and this is what we just spoke. And in the Middle East, of course,
It's a
You,
roundabout then.
yes, it's in China's interest also that this happens.
Yeah,
So yes, and then whole thing is again future. When you're looking 50, 100, 200 years, you're looking at again energy resources subsequently also. So the game is doesn't stop here in the short term. It's a long term thing. Now, what actually worries me is today is where we stand and where should we stand.
that is my last question with you, sir. India is better off on a weakened US with Russia and only to be edged by the Chinese, or what would be the equation between China and rest of the world in such a scenario? This is another whole show, actually.
This is a very interesting thing, and I don't want to discuss India because the I I am not in the policy making, or nobody would somebody may not appreciate my views. So I will just keep quiet as far as our own country is concerned, because this is what you JJ. I don't know what your full name is, but this is the only question we as Indians should be asking ourselves.
Absolutely.
And this is what I'm sure is a question being discussed at all levels, at the highest level also. So I think it's
Absolutely.
it's a most important question, and hats off to you for having brought it up. But I'm not going to discuss it.
I'm sure, sir, your views will be much appreciated. Let me assure you that. I mean, having said that, if I may just egg you on a little bit, India has done whatever is done and done well till now in this, as far as this war is concerned. So,
Absolutely, I salute our bureaucrats, diplomats, politicians for the stand that we've taken, and I've always appreciated our Chanakya. Uh, we guys are far superior from the rest of the world. We're a different league altogether, and that's what It makes me proud of the fact of being an Indian, because we guys are far far superior, and the world is realizing that, and they will as we go along, uh, irrespective of who's in power. And I'm not getting into the politics part of it, but trust you me, uh, our thought process, our diplomacy is way beyond others' comprehensions. The clarity that is existing in our minds in India is way, way superior to the rest of the world. So we all must be proud of being Indians, and the strategic autonomy that we enjoy and we profess. This is something which has stood by us all the while, and it will continue to do so. So we should all be proud of us, as is all I can say.
Tejas, I think it'll answer your question as well. He said continuing being a non-assigned a possibility for the future. I think Sir has answered that question by saying strategic autonomy. We are not non-aligned. We are just aligned with our own self. And I think Minister Jaishankar says that very, very beautifully.
No,
The
that's
only
a
country that India is aligned with is India itself. That's it.
yeah. Our own interest comes first, always and every time, irrespective of what other nation has
Absolutely.
alliances. So that's how we are surviving in this, entire complex world, and that is why we are respected,
Yeah.
because we take stand based on issues, not based on our
Emotions.
alliances or
Mm.
emotions.
So this episode will mark a point on time in terms of the Ukraine war discussions is concerned, because we've really put out the reality today. I am not just saying that, but the three, four aspects that we brought out with regards to the deception, with regards to the feint. It's an American feint before they actually their offensive of pulling off from the offensive in Ukraine. Uh, there's just so much which is happening here. Uh, as anything else, and I say this very often, a lot of people were not very interested in the Ukraine war in the past year. I wanted to continue on with it, and we at Dev Talks have continued on with it because this war is changing the world,
True.
and we need to be on top of it so that we can take benefit of it and actually derive anything. And just like JJ said, that इंडिया का क्या गेम है बॉस, बाकी सब तो ठीक है। बाकू शातमो चलता रहेगा, उसके बाद अवदीप का गिर जाएगा, क्रेमनाया, ये वो सब कुछ होता रहेगा। What is the game with India? And that's something that we need to keep a track of. They send emissaries from Ukraine for us to invite them for the G20 and allow Zelensky to do a speech. And a lot more will happen in the coming days that we guys will address. Sir, till then, thank you so much. Fantastic analysis. I must say, it's always out of the box. And appreciate you actually putting in the thought and doing the kind of research that you do. Till next time, sir. Jai
Thank
Hind.
you, Adi. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be around, and looking forward to the next one. Thank you so much.
Absolutely,
Take
sir.
care.
Jai Hind,
Bye.
sir.
Jai.